With 4 movies, 2 spin-offs, and an unspeakable amount of minions, the Despicable Me franchise is one of the most popular animated movie franchises of all time. It's like the Shrek series of the 2010s. With that said, it's time for us to do our thing and rank all of the noteworthy characters from the film saga from worst to best. Like usual, we'll start with those characters we just have nothing nice to say about. This is the F tier. Our bottom spot was a pretty easy choice. Miss Hattie is one of those characters who's just meant to be hated. It's pretty much an impossible feat to make a likable character out of one who tells an orphan to their face that she'll never be adopted. Thankfully, the movie does not try to. Verbally abusing children and forcing them into child labor are her only character traits, making her win our lowest spot in a landslide. We only have 2 other characters in the F tier. From the first sequel, we have Antonio. For the son of a guy as bombastic as El Macho, Antonio is an almost impressively bland character, but he has enough charisma to win over Margot instantly, which he uses to his advantage by asking her to be his date at his father's party, only to cheat on her at said party. That's cold, man. Kind of like you. Rounding out the bottom category is the Carney from the first movie. Sure, he has a minor role, but can you blame us for placing him so low anyway? The man runs an elaborately rigged carnival game and takes way too much pleasure in telling a little girl that she didn't win the unicorn plushie she was pining after.
Ooh, better luck next time.
Hopefully this jerk got knocked over into a different line of work. Now let's move on to the less despicable characters in the ensemble cast. These are the D tier characters, the ones who have at least some redeeming qualities. First up is Gru's busybody friend, Jillian. Throughout the second movie, she constantly tries to set Gru up with her friends, even pitching one whose husband just died, which is a whole new level of insensitivity.
Oh, I know someone whose husband just died.
We'll give her some credit for at least trying to do something nice, though, even if she's painfully oblivious to the fact that Gru just doesn't want to date random women he's never even met before. What a coincidence, Gru, I did not see her there either. Another minor character, this time from the first movie, is Fred. Gru's next door neighbor is a nice enough guy, even if his dog occasionally does his business on Gru's lawn. That's just what dogs do, unless they're dead.
You know dogs, they go wherever they want to go.
Unless they're dead.
Seriously though, Fred, just potty train your dog already, or at least pick up after him. Next, we have our first characters introduced in the fourth movie, Perry and Patsy Prescott. This is really shaping up to be the neighbors category, isn't it?
Hello! I'm your new neighbor! Just come in.
These two stand out from the last two by neither being nosy nor overly nice to their neighbors. In fact, Gru is the one butting in on their business much of the time, albeit with good intentions, and the sheer lack of interest on their part is pretty funny. They seem kinda stuck up, but we wouldn't say anything they do or say warrants a lower placement. And rounding out this category, we have the matriarch of the Gru family, Marlena Gru. Obviously, she loses a lot of points for her verbal abuse towards Gru. From openly favoring Drew to insulting all of Gru's motivations and dreams, she's a pretty terrible mother, and somehow she's deluded enough to think that she's a great one. The literal one time she says anything nice to Gru is at the end of the first movie, where she tells him that she's proud he became a good parent just like her. Yeah, if nothing else, at least she plays a crucial role in the story, and as mean as she is, she can be kind of funny. Now we enter the middle of the road tier for the characters who don't particularly stand out one way or another. This is the C tier. Kicking off this category, we have a victim of circumstance, Nico. When Lucy pressures Margot to take a piece of cheese from Nico's plate, he's ecstatic, which initially they just think is because he didn't feel excluded from the cheese festival. It turns out that in his culture, taking a piece of cheese is the equivalent of taking an engagement ring. Yeah, he got clingy with Margot quickly, but I guess cultural differences are just like that. Next is another minor character, Floyd Eagleson. As the owner of the Eagle Hair Club, when Gru comes by to investigate his shop, Floyd is more than happy to show him around and let him look at all the merchandise. Unfortunately for Floyd, Gru wouldn't be making any wig purchases, and later on he'd end up arrested after being framed by El Macho. It's a true shame, really. Hair like that should never be caged. He may not be a unicorn, but Lucky is pretty magical too. Does he do literally anything of importance in either movie he's in? No. Is he a cute little guy who makes Agnes happy? Yes. Sometimes you don't really need to have a huge role to be a good character. All you need to be is a silly little guy. And when you add a little bit of aggression to that mix, you get Gru's dog, allegedly, Kyle. This guy's an absolute mystery. What is he? Where did he come from? What are his motivations? Why does his pee kill plants? All these questions and more will probably never be answered. But sometimes a weird mutant dog thingy is a fun addition to your ensemble cast. Really, my only critique of Kyle is that we don't see more of him. It's cute that he ends up bonding with the girls, though. Speaking of girls, it's time to talk about the first supervillain of our list, Valentina. The girlfriend of Maxime Lemal, she takes the backseat to her partner more often than not. That's not to say there's anything wrong with her, aside from the whole villain thing. It's just that for one of the main villains of the movie, she doesn't really do much of anything. She does have a really cute dog though, so props for that. The movie's other secondary antagonist, Principal Ubelschlecht, fares a little better. She takes the cyborg man approach of having a badass high-tech wheelchair to fight her foes with. It's complete with spiky monster truck wheels and Doc Ock-styled arms. It's just a shame that she gets sidelined when Gru and Poppy go after Maxime. That fight between her and Lucy would have been fun to see in full. Closing out the C tier, we have one last group of criminals, the Nelsons. These guys are the lovely family of burglars who pick up Kevin, Stuart, and Bob to take them to Villain Con. There's just something needlessly hilarious about a family of bank robbers who are genuinely nice people, more than willing to give complete strangers a ride.
I knew you were villains, didn't I, honey? What a small world.
Not to mention seeing the father cock a legitimate gun in an Illumination movie. Another perk is that oftentimes these villain families tend to be at each other's throats, but these guys genuinely love each other. It's actually pretty darn refreshing. But with that, we've officially entered the upper half of the tiers. This is the B tier. Kicking off this category is Master Chow, pun entirely intended. Despite looking like she's about to start narrating a progressive commercial, the only thing this lady is ensuring is your right to defend yourself.
I am a master of the ancient Shaolin art of Kung Fu.
She befriends the minions quickly, giving them the training they need to protect Gru from his enemies. There isn't too much else to say about her. She's a helping hand and a helping foot, too. Kicks are important as well. Now let's start on Gru's found family, and its newest addition, Gru Jr. This little guy had it out for his daddy for a while, and as hilariously malicious as it seemed, it's still worth noting that he's just a baby. It's hard not to laugh at him attempting to cause Gru to crash his car, but it's equally hard to not appreciate the times he managed to help Gru out. From turning off the security lasers at Lycée Pasban to saving him during the final showdown with Maxime. From Gru's youngest kid to his oldest, next is Margot. Admittedly, she has the least personality out of the girls. She's not as cutesy as Agnes nor as chaotic as Edith, but Margot has a lot of heart. She's a pretty great older sister, always there to comfort and protect her siblings however she can. We do have a small qualm with her though. While she has some decent storytelling potential, it never feels like it's fully fleshed out. This is especially true in the fourth movie, where she's set up to be worried about losing her old friends during the relocation. A plotline that's brought up once more. Like, that's it. She doesn't do anything else. I can't help but feel like that's a waste. But it can't be easy to focus on like 20 characters at once, such as Poppy Prescott, an aspiring villain who wants to attend Gru's alma mater. And admittedly, 4 villains to take into consideration would have been a bit much for one movie, so it's good that Poppy ends up having a surprising amount of heart. She doesn't back down from her dreams of villainy and heists, but she proves herself to have a good heart. When Gru's family is paid an unwilling visit by Maxime and Valentina, she's the one to warn Gru and provide him with a ride to rescue Gru Jr. As if that weren't enough, she's also trained a cat to play DDR like a professional, which is pretty impressive. From a good-hearted villain to a team of truly evil villains, next we have the Vicious Six. Or 5, I guess. We'll admit, it takes a certain amount of talent to make us hate a group of villains so early into the movie. They have fun names, powers, and designs, sure, but they also betray their oldest friend and leader after having him do their dirty work for them.
The Vicious Six has a new head honcho.
While that makes them objectively awful people, it makes them some pretty solid villains, the kind you're itching to see taken down throughout the whole movie. This might be controversial, but we've decided to place the minions here. No, not all of them, but the seeming hive mind that makes up the majority of them. The minions are a divisive group of characters. On one hand, they're cute, they can be quite funny, and I'm gonna say it, the Minions movies overall are perfectly decent. But on the other hand, well, sometimes there can be a little too much of a good thing. As fun as the Minions are, sometimes it can feel like they take the spotlight away from other characters. The name is comic relief for a reason after all, but the real reason they're so low is pretty obvious. How could you monsters not help the one who got stuck in the vending machine? If only the Mega Minions had been there. Sure, these guys basically exist solely to crank out more Minion merchandise, but honestly, given how obvious Minions with superpowers as a concept is, we're just shocked they didn't do it sooner. It's just good business, really, and I want to shout out Mega Minion Mel in particular. His laser is powerful enough to power through the entire planet in a matter of seconds, reaching out to space to cut a satellite into pieces. I think we really need to reconsider the power scaling in the Despicable Me universe, but perhaps that's a discussion for another day. If your property was damaged by Mel's laser, you might qualify for a loan from Mr. Perkins. Just kidding, Mr. Perkins is the head of the Bank of Evil and therefore doesn't care for your property damage / reparations. Perkins is a pretty good antagonistic force. What's a more relatable villain than bankruptcy, after all? Given that this dude is massive, evil, and scariest of all, a banker, the constant threat of Gru proving himself worthy of a loan is all too real. Next, we have a quintessential example of the ideal male physique, Silas Ramsbottom. While he's technically just doing his job, he's helping a lot of good people in the process. In Despicable Me 4, he's forced to come out of retirement to help Gru and his family get to a safe place far away from Maxime Le Mal. Of course, he also does questionable things like superhuman experimentation on the minions, but that ended up coming in handy, right? Maybe he should have increased their brain cell count, though. In any case, we've now entered the most honorable tiers for the characters who really stand out. This is the A tier. First up is Gru's wannabe villain brother, Drew. Like many twin characters, Drew is the polar opposite of his brother. Whereas Gru is a skillful villain who's left that life behind, Drew is a clumsy wannabe who's, well, he's not a professional villain.
Help me! Ow! Ow! I'm okay!
Though his dynamic with Gru and his family is genuinely quite sweet, you've gotta love just how seamlessly he takes on the role of an uncle to the Garls, and come on, the guy is amazing here. We've gotta give credit where it's due. Now it's time to talk about the manliest man to ever man, El Macho. Right away, he has one of the absolute greatest character designs in the franchise. He looks like Mario's buff Hispanic uncle, and we mean that in the best way possible. On top of that, El Macho is just a fun character to watch, whether he's dancing to unlock the door in his secret lair or riding a shark into an active volcano. While he isn't the best villain in the series, Maxime Le Mal is still a pretty darn good one, and undeniably the most evil. Seriously, from mutating innocent people for no reason to a plan that begins and ends with kidnapping your high school rival's baby, this guy's an absolute menace. Also, we've got to appreciate the more meta aspects of his character. This could be a stretch, sure, but making the villain of the fourth movie themed around a cockroach, who is notorious for being unkillable, is genuinely really funny, even if it wasn't intentional. On the topic of absolute menaces, next is a more endearing one. Edith. She's the tomboy of the Garls, which is ironic since she's the one wearing the most pink, but you'd do well to not judge a book by its cover. Edith is a skilled ninja in training who Gru occasionally has to instruct to try to not kill anybody.
Edith, try not to kill anyone.
But her assassination talents aren't used for evil, or not. In the fourth movie, she takes down an overzealous martial arts instructor for the crime of making Agnes upset. An edgy tomboy is great, but an edgy tomboy with a soft spot for their sibling? That's how you make them memorable, baby. Landing just outside of the top 10 is our boy Otto. See, I told you guys there were more minions in higher tiers. Otto is a character in Rise of Gru, and he's a bit of an outcast. The other minions do not like this guy, and it's understandable why. He did trade the medallion for a pet rock, which led to Gru getting into hot water, but he worked just as hard to get it back. Kicking off the top 10 is Gru's wife, Lucy Wild Gru. Gru's partner in crime stopping, Lucy is an enthusiastic agent who loves her job and her family. She just oozes positivity in general, but it never takes away from her doing her job. She manages to kidnap Gru pretty easily simply by shouting her gadgets' names after she uses them rather than before, and that's only the start of a surprisingly sweet love story.
Your lipstick, Taser.
Yeah, it's just a memento.
In the third and fourth movies, we see more of her bonding with Gru and the girls, and while she makes mistakes for sure, she always comes across as a loving, caring mother who will jump headfirst into danger to protect her kids from harm. Good girls are great, but we ask you, doesn't it feel so good to be bad? Scarlet Overkill would say so, and as a villain famous for being unapologetically evil, who could blame her? Scarlet is a great people person, able to use her charisma to charm the pants off of everyone around her so she can use them later. This is most noticeable in how she treats the minions. She acts as a motherly figure towards them right from the get-go, only to end their first day as her servants with a threat to their lives thinly veiled as a bedtime story.
Good luck getting that crown tomorrow, little piggies.
Scarlet isn't your average kids movie villain. She's legitimately insane, to the point where even thinking they've betrayed her was enough for her to sentence the minions to lifelong torture in the dungeon. You gotta appreciate that level of evil. Following Scarlet is none other than her better half, Herb Overkill. Sure, he's an accomplice to Scarlet's crimes by acting as her inventor, but that doesn't mean he's nearly as bad. Herb can be surprisingly nice and down to earth. He even seems to befriend the minions when torturing them proves to be a fruitless endeavor, showing that he can be a chill guy when the situation allows for it.
Are we comfy? Doesn't matter! This is torture.
What earns him such a high spot is that, despite being far less malicious and seemingly way more mentally stable than Scarlet, Herb still never betrays her. Scarlet loves Herb, and the feeling is mutual, and the fact that they have a genuinely loving, supportive relationship despite their clear differences is enough for us to call them some of the series' best antagonists. But while Herb is a great evil scientist, he can't hold a candle to Dr. Nefario, the inventor of the notorious fart gun. Despite his occasional lack of hearing capabilities, Nefario is an invaluable asset to Gru's team. In the first movie, he builds various gear like cookie robots that help Gru steal the shrink ray, and when he suspects that Gru's relationship with the girls is getting in the way of his work, he takes care of it by calling the orphanage to take them back.
I did it for your own good. Come on.
Let's go get that moon.
Despite all this, at the end of the day, Nefario is a friend first and foremost. He ends up helping Gru get the girls back and continues to help him throughout the remainder of the saga. Heck, in Rise of Gru, it's revealed that he's the one who connected Gru with the Vicious Six, showing that he's always happy to help newcomers to the villain scene, and ultimately to accept their decisions to change their ways. Nefario is a good friend, and that's enough to earn him a pretty high spot just outside of our top tier. This category, though, is reserved for the best of the best. This is the S tier. Kicking off this category, we have just one secondary character in a sea of main ones, Otto's biker buddy from Minions Rise of Gru. Look, this guy's just too nice to not give a top tier position. He took Otto under his wing with zero hesitation, gave him his medallion and a ride to San Francisco to rescue Gru, and most importantly, gave him the first real genuine friend he made throughout the whole movie. These two have such a weirdly wholesome relationship, and it comes from a character who doesn't even have a name. If this were a friendship tier list, he'd almost undoubtedly be number one. But it's time to enter the top 5, and I'd feel like a bad boy if I didn't give Balthazar Brat a high position.
Heist music!
Seriously, Brat is a weirdly great antagonist, especially in concept. The idea of a child star completely snapping once Hollywood suddenly decides it wants nothing to do with him? Fire! The idea of said child star embracing the character he played on TV and planning to use merchandise and plotting to pull off some of his crimes? Peak supervillainy. Many consider Despicable Me 3 to be the weakest of the trilogy, now quadrilogy, but whether you agree with that or not, you gotta admit Balthazar Brat is a surprisingly good villain who poses a genuine threat both to Gru, whose pursuit of him caused him to lose his job, and to Hollywood at large, which he plotted to send into space. Also, come on, that design is just too hilarious to not be top 5 material. Landing just outside of the top 3, we ironically have a group of 3, Kevin, Stuart, and Bob. These minions star in their namesakes spin-off movies, and as a result, there are some mixed opinions on them. But you know what, as far as minions go, these little guys are the best. Kevin is a devoted leader who's willing to sacrifice his life to save his tribe, from searching the earth for the perfect boss to taking a nuke to the stomach so they wouldn't have to. Stuart, the aspiring celebrity that he is obsessed with fame, fortune, and ladies. Or the fire hydrants. What the heck, love is love, man. And finally, there's Bob, who's just plain adorable. Come on, don't tell me I'm the only one who thought it was sweet how he gave Scarlet his teddy bear's crown as a parting gift.
For me?
These 3 have surprising amounts of personality for minions, and they're much more consistently tolerable than most of the others. As great as these 3 are, there are 3 more characters we feel deserve the honor of the podium of greatness, though. For the Bronze Medal of Greatness, we have the only character whose cuteness can rival Bob's, Agnes. She's a simple character. She's cute. She likes fluffy unicorns, fairy princesses, and her family. Really, we could end it right there, but Agnes takes the usual dose of cuteness and pumps it full of steroids.
I'm pure in heart, right?
Every movie, without fail, there were always so many moments where the kids steal the spotlight and make you say, "Aww," until your lungs shrivel up. Whether it's her fear of unicorns not being real, her attempts to matchmake Gru and Lucy, or even just her playing with her siblings and pets, Agnes is like the movie form of cotton candy. So sweet, you almost get sick of it. That said, the reason she's so high up goes beyond that cuteness. She's also more or less the heart of Gru's character and redemption arc. Who invited Gru to the recital that kickstarted his redemption? Agnes. Who inspired Gru to go for a relationship with Lucy? Agnes. Who gave away all her belongings from piggy bank coins to stuffed unicorns just to help her family out? Agnes. She's a ride-or-die daughter who always wants to help out, and if you can be all of that on top of being cute as a button, then you've earned a top 3 spot in our book. But the top 2 ought to be fairly obvious by now, so our runner-up is none other than the first movie's main antagonist, Vector. Not to be confused with Victor Perkins, completely different guy, but it's a common mistake.
Victor was my nerd name. Now I am Vector.
No, this is Vector, a man whose only saving graces are his brain, his charisma, and the uncanny ability to make orange a flattering color.
Are you wearing pajamas?
These aren't pajamas. This is a warm-up suit.
Vector is one of those delightful villains who's just unapologetically awful. There's no tragic backstory here, nor is there some overarching ambition to take over the world or anything. Vector just wants to commit crimes with both direction and magnitude in order to direct, and magnitude, the entire world's eyes towards himself and his dirty deeds. On top of having unrivaled dance moves, godlike confidence, and an arsenal of weapons that would make Batman break a sweat, Vector has a beautiful combination of both pure evil and genuine fun. He's a villain you want taken down, especially with how meaningless his crimes are and how he's willing to stoop so low as to kidnap 3 children, but he's the kind who will crack you up while you're waiting for his defeat. With such a great antagonist, you gotta wonder who could possibly outrank the legendary Vector? Okay, no you don't. It was never a contest. Gru has knocked over the other competitors and claimed the gold medal of greatness.
I got the shrink ray.
Gru, like Vector, was both fun and diabolical upon his debut. The difference, mainly, is that he has much more character development. Despite living his whole life trying to win his mother's love and pride through extravagant crimes, Gru remained sad and empty until three little kittens, girls, walked into his life. But even during his villain arc, it was always clear that Gru had a heart behind that despicable persona. He was the kind of guy that would pop kids as balloon animals, freeze the people in front of him in a coffee shop's line, and then some, but he was also the kind who would treat his minions with respect, knowing all of them by name, and would even stick up for a little girl who just got scammed out of her plush unicorn at a carnival game. Ultimately, Gru redeems himself by becoming a father to the three girls, giving up his dreams of villainy to support and encourage them. But even though he's a good guy from then on, Gru is still an absolute savage when he needs to be. From freezing Antonio as payback for standing up Margot, to clearing the air with Maxime that he did steal his talent show performance idea, Gru is the definition of chaotic good, really. He'll commit crimes like it's nothing, but he's not out to hurt anyone, he's out to enjoy life with his wife, his girls, his boy, and his minions. Gru is a chaotic man, but he's a good man, and with both heart and hilarity in his arsenal, he's an easy pick for us as the Despicable Me franchise's greatest character.
I'm having a bad day, is what I would be saying if Despicable Me 4 wasn't finally here. Now that we've got even more baddies and goodies to discuss, today we're ranking all the characters from Despicable Me 1 through 4, from good to evil. So first up, spoilers ahead, but it doesn't take an evil genius to figure that out. So let's get started as usual with the most noble and pure-hearted characters. These are the good. And the gold medal of good, surprising absolutely nobody, goes to the series' most adorable character, Agnes. The youngest of Gru's girls, a lover of all things fluffy, sweet, unicorn-related, or even unicorn-adjacent. Agnes is the closest any character in the series comes to being pure of heart. Her placement is already pretty much justified by the fact that she's an innocent child, but then there's her generosity to consider. She's always there for her family, and we see her acting as an eager helper to Gru whenever she can be.
Are you really gonna save the world?
In the second movie, she helps console him after he finds out Lucy is leaving for Australia.
Was there anything you could do?
And in the third, she sells her belongings when Gru loses his job, including that ever so fluffy unicorn plush she got in the first movie. Agnes is truly too pure for this world and needs to be protected at all costs. That said, she really should start training Lucky indoors. Lucky doesn't really have all that much screen time, and that's fair enough. What with all the supervillains, family drama, and sentient Twinkies, there isn't always room for this little unicorn goat dude to shine. But Lucky is a loyal companion to Agnes, to the point where even their brief separation in the fourth movie isn't enough to take away their special bond. He may not be stopping supervillains, but Lucky is a good boy, and sometimes that's all you need to be. Taking our bronze medal of good is the man who gave his own medal away, the biker from Minions: Rise of Gru. He isn't exactly the most quintessential character, but we had to give this absolute legend a mention. A true good Samaritan. He stopped to check on Otto during a bike ride through the desert, and had no qualms with giving him the medallion he was looking for. On top of being generous and sincerely concerned for the little guy's well-being, he offers him a ride and the two basically become besties in less than 24 hours.
Frisco, disco! It's your lucky day, kid. I'm headed up the coast. I could drop you off on the way.
He's one of those people who's kind not because it benefits him, but because he just really genuinely wants to be. Landing just outside of our top 3 is the oldest of Gru's girls, Margot. At 12 years old, she's taken on the role as the group's older sister her whole life, and thankfully, she's quite good at it. We see her best moments in how she interacts with Agnes, often protecting her from Edith's scary stories or comforting her when she's sad or scared.
Okay, don't worry. Everything's going to be fine. We're gonna be really happy here.
As for her dynamics outside of the family, Margot is generally polite, but she's not a pushover. When she knocks on your door to sell cookies, you can tell her you're an automated message all you want, but you can't make her believe it. The worst you can expect from Margot is an occasional act of rebellion, which usually just means talking or dancing with a boy behind Gru's back. Next, we have the leading lady of the Gru family, Lucy Wilde Gru. Like Gru, she's intensely protective of her family, although she isn't perfect.
Take a bite of his cheese, young lady, right now.
Like when she forced Margot to take a piece of cheese from Nico's plate, which unintentionally got her engaged to him.
Hello, my schmoopsy poo. Whoa, hey.
She'll always stick up for her girls and take care of their messes. She's a mama bear in the purest form. Later in the third movie, she even saves the girls from falling to their doom, with quick thinking, acrobatics, and a whole lot of bubblegum. Unlike Gru, however, we have to give her some bonus points for her lack of a villain arc. She's been working at the AVL for presumably years and takes great joy in her job of saving people and taking down bad guys. In the fourth movie, though, she does have one unsavory moment when her new identity turns her into a hairstylist. She ends up making a client go bald and setting the whole place on fire in one day.
What? Shouldn't be smoking.
While we understand her nerves, the fact that she didn't bother to check on said client to see if she was okay is a bit messed up. It might be surprising to see us get to the minions so early, but some of them have earned a more honorable spot than others, like Otto. He admittedly isn't the smartest guy around, but Otto makes up for it with sheer heart and determination. He made the grave mistake of giving the medallion to Brad to trade for a pet rock, which put Gru and the other minions in serious danger. For all his mistakes, though, he does everything in his power and then some to retrieve the medallion and fix the mess he made. His clumsiness earns him the Darwin Medal for sure, but his heart earns him a spot in the good section to even it out. And of course, we can't ignore the spin-off movie's main minions, Kevin, Stuart, and Bob. One a leader, one a musician, one adorable. But all of them are heroes to their people. While the minions in general have to lose some points for their lifelong ambition to serve whatever despicable villains they can find, these three gain those points right back for their intentions. When the minions become depressed over not having a master, Kevin leads the trio to search for a villain fit to lead them and give their lives purpose again. While they wreak havoc, as all minions do, they end up saving their tribe through their efforts. Kevin was willing to blow himself up to save his minion brethren from Scarlet. Bob gives Scarlet the very crown the Queen rewarded him with as a consolation prize, which was seriously sweet given how much she'd done to the minions. And as for Stuart, he was there. No matter what, he was always there for his minion buddies, and isn't that what matters most at the end of the day? But as great as those minions are, it's time for the real star of the show, Gru. While he had one of the most iconic redemption arcs of the 21st century, Felonious Gru had a rough start, morally speaking. From popping kids' balloons to eating ice cream in front of people trying to lose weight, there were few lows this mastermind wouldn't sink to, and although his crimes were usually a thinly veiled attempt to get his mother's approval, they could still be pretty bad.
When you hear about it, you're going to be very proud.
Good luck with that.
Arguably, his worst was adopting 3 little orphan girls to use them as part of his plan to steal the moon. Thankfully, though, Gru showed that beneath that evil facade was a good heart. Once his girls stole his heart, he was willing to drop everything to save them from Vector, even returning the moon to its rightful place after he'd stolen it. From then on out, Gru is an absolute legend as both a dad and a hero.
How come you're so fat?
Because my house is made of candy.
He puts dangerous criminals like Balthazar Brad and El Macho away with the AVL, and will go to any lengths to protect his family from harm. He can be overprotective, sure, especially in regards to Margot and her attempts to talk to boys, but he's still always a source of encouragement and comfort. Whether it's freezing 2-timing dates and trying their delightful food.
Good soup. I love the combination of gummy bears with meat.
Or saving their lives on multiple occasions. Gru always put the happiness of his girls and now his boy first and foremost. And the fourth movie gives him even more brownie points for how patient he is with Gru Jr. Seriously, that baby was absolutely out to get him for the first half of the film. And Gru is still nothing but an absolute angel to him. And that's how you know he's a great dad. We've got one more group of minions to talk about before we leave the good category, the Mega Minions. Man, they will never run out of ways to keep cranking out minion merch, will they? As if the minions weren't unpredictable and dangerous enough, this movie decided to have them act as the objects of the AVL's experimentation to give them superhuman powers.
It's time to get you out for some real-world trading. And if you do well out there, you'll be the AVL's new secret weapon.
This includes hardening, flying, stretching, super strength, and laser beams strong enough to cut through to the other side of the Earth in seconds and hit a satellite in space without even starting to fade. Like, seriously, this guy is actually a legitimate threat. He could destroy the planet by accident.
I'm quite sure I won't regret this.
But these 5 were more than happy to use their powers to save people, or at least try to save them. They also gave Maxime Lamal the absolute beating of his lifetime at the end of the movie, which was one of the most cathartic scenes in the whole franchise. But let's talk about Gru's first biological child, Gru Jr. Honestly, we were pretty unsure where this little guy would end up. At the start of the movie, he's shown to absolutely dislike Gru, and it's never really explained why, since Gru is as loving and caring as can be with him. He startles him by popping balloons, which causes him to ruin his relaxation time and also nearly causes a car crash. That said, all of that is null in a moral sense when you consider that he's a baby. He's not doing this stuff maliciously, as we see later on when he and Gru pull off a heist together and actually bond. He ends up saving Gru's life from Maxime in the final battle, literally only able to overcome the latter's influence by sheer love for his dad. Every endearing anti-hero needs his endearing anti-hero son. And fittingly, at the bottom end of the good section, we have Silas Ramsbottom. As the leader of the Anti-Villain League, he does a lot of good work. At times, he can seem cold and distant, but he's surprisingly loyal to his employees. He's a decent boss who genuinely cares about his employees, and does what he can to get them out of danger, including relocating Gru's family to the town of Mayflower when Maxime threatens to kill them after escaping prison. When he finds out that Gru has been compromised, he immediately sends the Mega Minions out to rescue him, showcasing his loyalty once again.
Assemble the Mega Minions!
But ironically, the Mega Minions are also the main reason he isn't any higher. He performed the experiments that turned these 5 into the Mega Minions, without knowing if they would even survive. Guess it's better than performing those experiments on humans, sure, but it's still sort of messed up. Not really much better than animal experimentation at that point. But with how many criminals there were even in the good section, you can imagine how many more there are in the gray area. The last of Gru's kids, Edith, is actually first up in this category. And she's an interesting case. She's by far the least moral of the girls, and with more interest in violence and other dark subject matter than anything else.
We're gonna have to make a little trouble later.
What? I already have!
She's a mischief maker through and through, whether it's commissioning the minions to prank unsuspecting butlers or scaring Agnes with her prayers, thanking the good Lord for the blessing of, bedbugs. There's definitely a case to place her lower, but we have to give her some credit for a few things. For one, while she is a troublemaker, she isn't a criminal or anything. I don't think she is, at least.
Hey,
Somebody broke that.
Nor does she seem to want to hurt anyone. And while she's not as caring as Margot, Edith is actually a surprisingly decent big sister. She teases Agnes a lot, sure, but she's also more than willing to stick by her for hours to wait for a unicorn to show up. And in the 4th movie, she beats up a karate instructor for making Agnes upset. Edith has a heart and plenty of time to grow up into someone who shows more of it. Moving on to another morally gray kid, Poppy Prescott, one of the many characters introduced in the 4th movie. Poppy is Chet Cunningham's new neighbor. She recognizes Gru as, well, Gru, an alumni from his old school with a French name that translates to No Good High School. She blackmails Gru with his identity as a former supervillain to perform a heist that she thinks will look good on her record, which is a pretty rough start for her placement here.
You're of respecting your elders?
I don't respect boomers. I just mock them.
But thankfully, she shows off more of her good side than anything else.
Perfect!
She's good with kids and animals, shown by her care for her cat and her interactions with Gru Jr. But her best deed by far was warning Gru when she discovered Principal Ubelschlecht was paying his family an unwilling visit, even going as far as to help him catch up to Maxime and save Gru Jr. So enjoy that evil high school career while you can, Poppy. We all know you're gonna have a pretty sweet redemption arc one day. From one wannabe supervillain to another, Drew Gru is the proof that while the apple doesn't always fall far from the tree, that doesn't mean it never does. Drew was envied greatly by his long-lost twin for all the great stuff he had. He's rich, he's got a mansion, their mother preferred him, and most importantly, he's got a sick head of hair. But Drew isn't perfect. While he performed some reckless crimes like petty candy theft, he was never able to live up to their legendary supervillain father's expectations, which led him to overcompensate by trying to join Gru on his own missions.
Hey, you want to take her out for a spin just for some fun?
For his choice of a criminal lifestyle and general tendency to wreak havoc, Drew does lose some points. But at the end of the day, he proved he was a decent guy by dropping his anger towards Gru to help him rescue the girls from Balthazar Brad.
We're after the diamond, not the bubble gum. Oh, got it!
Drew might be a criminal, albeit a pretty mediocre one, but he's also good with kids and never seems to want to genuinely hurt anyone. While we've already mentioned their kid, a quick mention of Perry and Patsy Prescott is in order. As the Gru family's temporary neighbors, they come off as a little bit snooty and standoffish. They don't necessarily do anything wrong, but we have to bring up the fact that Patsy tells a story off screen that ends up with her and her husband, quote, no longer being allowed on the island of Oahu. But now it's time to get into the more villain-adjacent characters like Wild Knuckles, former leader of the Vicious Six. Look, I know it feels wrong to place him this low, but the fact is that Wild Knuckles spent his entire life committing notorious crimes as the leader of the Vicious Six. After they betrayed him, he vowed revenge and was willing to kidnap and torture Gru, a child, mind you, to get it.
Welcome to my newest torture device, the Disco Inferno.
The only thing saving him from a lower spot was, of course, that he did redeem himself in the end. He ended up defeating the remaining Vicious Six members, not to get revenge, but to actually protect Gru, and was even willing to die in the process. He became sort of a criminal father figure to Gru, and while he was still committing crimes, at least he was showing love and care to a kid who never really had much of it to begin with.
We make a good team. We do?
But let's talk about one of Gru's elderly allies, Dr. Nefario. What's an evil supervillain without his faithful inventor? Nefario is one of those characters whose morals really depend on what perspective you look at him from. On one hand, he's a great asset to Gru's career. In Rise of Gru, he's the one who helps connect Gru and the Vicious Six.
If you ever get famous, remember who gave you your first gadget.
And in the first movie, he faithfully supports his endeavors by building gadgets and keeping any and all distractions from villainy away. But on the other hand, this does mean that Nefario had no problem going behind Gru's back and sabotaging the family he was trying to build. What keeps him in the gray area, despite his insistence on being an evil, or at least not good, scientist, is his loyalty to Gru. While he wavers a lot, like leaving him in the second movie temporarily to work for El Macho, he ends up proving his loyalty by rejoining Gru in the end. In the fourth movie, he even restores Gru Jr. to normal after he's mutated by Maxime's cockroachification ray. Nefario isn't a good guy by any means, but he is a good friend, and he's willing to place his loved ones above villainy every time. From one loyal companion to another, Gru's dog-like thing, Kyle, is next. There isn't really much to say about him. He's a pretty ill-behaved dog, given how he initially tried to attack Agnes when she first arrived, and generally acts hostile towards most people he encounters. That said, he does show some level of loyalty to Gru and his family, and it seems like he's warmed up to Agnes later on, even going as far as to play a dragon at her fairy princess-themed birthday party. On the topic of loyalty, it's finally time to talk about the Minions. While the spin-off trio, Otto and the Mega Minions, got some points for their general goodwill towards minion kind and beyond, we have to talk about the absolute menaces the Minions are. We could talk about their whole purpose being to serve the most evil master they can find, from dinosaurs to cavemen, but that's just how they're made. You can't fault them for an act of God, right?
It's an act of God. Ain't no account for no act of God.
We could wonder all day what criminal activities they've gotten up to over the decades, but all we know is that they like serving supervillains, and they like bananas. So we're gonna give them the gluttony medal. But despite their loyalty and genuine love for their masters, the reason they're this low is because of how they treat each other. The Minions, they just absolutely throttle each other. It can be as innocent as a prank, or as severe as them actually dogpiling one of their own and beating the living crap out of them. Take the fourth movie, for instance. One Minion gets stuck in a vending machine, and the Minions not only refuse to help him, but at the end of the movie, it's revealed that they never even went back for him. They literally left this guy to rot in a vending machine for eternity because it was funny. And finally, rounding out the gray area, we have Herb Overkill, one half of the main villain duo of the first Minions movie. Herb is his wife's opposite in many ways. He's nowhere near as ruthless as Scarlet, first of all, mainly acting as her inventor and second in command. He's more than willing to torture anyone who crosses her, which simultaneously showcases some devotion to his wife and some disdain for literally everyone else. They actually have a loving relationship, which earns him one of our more respectable Lust Sinner medals. In addition to his love for Scarlet, it's worth mentioning that Herb himself isn't really that bad. When torturing the minions proves futile, he decides instead to befriend and play with them,
Prepare for torture, which I do.
showing that he's more than capable of being friendly when he's left to his own devices. But now we're getting into those with truly despicable traits. This is the bad to evil category, or if you prefer, the despicable them. He's nowhere near a supervillain, but we have to mention Antonio. El Macho's son is a twig with black hair and a decent fashion sense. In other words, he's the most dashing man Margot has seen in her entire life, which is why, after inviting her to his party as a date, it really hurt to see him two-time her by dancing with another girl. Gru's mother, Marlena Gru, is up next. When you're such a hateful mother that you're the entire reason your son is a supervillain in the first place, there's really no other category we could even think about placing you in. Throughout Gru's life, he's worked to impress his mother with his ambitions and dreams, to which every time she's answered him with cold, callous insults. When Gru tells her he wants to go to the moon, she tells him
NASA isn't sending the monkeys anymore.
She also openly favored her other son, Drew, who she didn't even tell Gru existed until he was a middle-aged man with a family and a mortgage. And the final character who isn't in full-on supervillain territory, Miss Hattie, is up next. She's the owner of the orphanage in the first movie, and despite working as a caretaker for kids who have nobody else to turn to, still manages to be one of the scummiest characters in the entire franchise. She uses the girls as child laborers to sell her cookies, giving them daily quotas and shouting at them when they fail to reach them, even placing them in boxes of shame when they disappoint her. This may be a hot take, but we're giving her the Greed Sinner medal. Using child labor to sell your cookies is a whole new level of greed. Her cruelty extends beyond that, though. She's also verbally abusive to her girls, even telling Edith directly,
"You're never gonna get adopted, Edith. You know that, don't you?"
She's proven wrong when Dr. Gru pays a visit, who she suddenly feels no need running a background check on once he compliments her. She almost seems worse than the supervillains in certain ways. I mean, at least they're honest about how evil they are, unlike her. Every villain needs resources to do their dirty work, and that's where Mr. Perkins comes in. As the Bank of Evil's president, he loans out funds to support villains in their various schemes, which means that he's also an accomplice to every villain he's ever worked with. You could argue that the man's just trying to run a business, but it is an evil one. I mean, it says so right in the name. He's also the father of Vector, and while he isn't an outstanding dad by any means, he at least supports Vector in his villainous endeavors.
Don't worry, the moon is as good as ours.
And as of the ending scene of Despicable Me 4, they're both in prison for presumably life, so they have plenty of time to bond. But now it's time to move into the main villains of the franchise, starting with the least evil of the group, El Macho. A notorious supervillain with manliness to spare. It's said that he died riding a shark strapped with dynamite into an active volcano, but it turns out he just faked it for views. While they were busy viewing this, he worked on making PX-41, a serum that turned ordinary creatures like minions into mindless zombies of destruction.
It's time for me to make a spectacular return to evil.
He planned to use this to take over the world, even inviting Gru to join him. What a nice, generous guy. Oh, actually, he's trying to take over the world. The closest thing he has to any redeeming qualities is the fact that he at least seems to be a decent father to his son Antonio. Next up is one of the newest villains, Valentina. Acting as one of the secondary antagonists of Despicable Me 4, she doesn't seem to be nearly as malicious as her boyfriend. That doesn't take away from her acting as an accomplice everywhere he goes, though. Whether he's planning mass murder, kidnapping, or legitimate crimes against humanity, Valentina is right there in the passenger seat. I guess if nothing else, she's a decent girlfriend who tries to be supportive of her man, but that only saves her from falling so low. Rolling right into our next spot is Principal Jubel Schlecht. Starting with the obvious, she's the head honcho of a notorious supervillain school. She's trained countless villains in varying degrees of evil, most notably her favorite student, Maxime Lamel. After Gru and his team steal the school mascot, she wastes no time in telling him exactly where Gru's family is located, knowingly placing him and his family in grave danger. She also took no issue with terrorizing the girls and even attempting to kill their mom in front of them. This lady is seriously messed up, but we can't deny that she's doing her job well. Her students really outdo her in terms of villainy. We've now entered the bottom 5, and it begins with the villain who started it all, Vector. The man who commits crimes with both direction and magnitude, Vector has the confidence of a god and, to an extent, the criminal capabilities to back it up. Vector is absolutely ruthless, with a security system with an arsenal fit to rival the US military, and enough evil in his heart to use it without any hesitation. And speaking of no hesitation, Vector doesn't mind using his kids in his schemes. When Gru steals the moon, Vector kidnaps the girls and holds them hostage until Gru gives him the moon, showing that he was fully willing to murder 3 children to achieve his goals. He didn't learn his lesson either. In the short film Mooned, Vector is offered a ride from a friendly minion, but he refuses it, which results in him getting stranded even further into space on Mars.
This is totally what I planned! Ha!
He did somehow make it back home, given that he's now in prison in the ending scene of Despicable Me 4, and he seems to be enjoying himself. I guess if we had to say anything overtly good about him, it's probably that he at least tries to make the color orange look good, which is truly a heroic achievement. But from one side of the color wheel to the other, we have a character who's been a bad boy. Balthazar Bratt lands just outside of our podium of evil. And honestly, we do kind of feel for him. Child stardom isn't easy, especially when Hollywood decides to cancel your show the second you start being a little less cute. Desperate to hold on to his fame, Bratt went crazy and decided to become the mini supervillain character he played on TV.
I've been a bad boy!
First things first, the Pride Center medal has to go to this guy easily. From merchandise of himself to robots shaped like himself, Brad is obsessed with being seen and loved by everyone around him. But more than that, he wants revenge on Hollywood for casting him aside. So he plans to reenact one of his iconic TV episodes by sending the whole city up into space. As if this weren't bad enough already, he becomes even more sinister by kidnapping Gru's girls to distract him from stopping his plan. Brat lives up to his name. His childhood trauma might earn him some sympathy points, but it doesn't make up for how surprisingly threatening he was. Now, we hate to give these guys a medal of any kind, but the bronze medal of evil goes to the Vicious Six, obviously excluding Wild Knuckles. Bellbottom, Svengeance, Jean-Claude, Nunchuck, and Stronghold. These 5 are among the most notorious supervillains the world has ever seen, with a reputation that really makes you wonder who's making merchandise of all these wanted criminals. But that question can wait. For now, all you need to know is that they're not just villains, they're traitorous villains. Despite Wild Knuckles going in solo to steal the medallion and leading the group for years, they're all perfectly fine with betraying him and leaving him to die so they can bring in a fresh face to the team. When Gru shows up, they thank him for his dedication by kidnapping him and holding him hostage, showing that, like the previous 2, they have no problem involving literal children in their schemes. They also tried to straight up crucify Gru on a giant clock tower, which is just a whole new level of screwed up. You guys should sit down for this one because Scarlet Overkill has officially been demoted from her status as Despicable Me's most evil villain. Don't go thinking we've softened up on her though. Sure, she grew up impoverished, but that doesn't excuse her lifelong ambition to steal the Queen's crown and become the ruler of England, and eventually the whole world.
You have no idea who you are messing with. I am the greatest supervillain of all time!
She's undoubtedly committed some unspeakable crimes to get there, given how she's lauded as the most dangerous supervillain in the world, and openly threatens to kill the minions if they fail her. Thankfully, the minions don't fail her, instead getting the crown by a freak accident, giving it to her once confronted. She thanks them, naturally, by sentencing them to be tortured in a dungeon by Herb for their perceived betrayal for eternity. To hold a grudge against a malicious traitor is one thing, but to hold a grudge against someone you just thought was betraying you, that's a mindset worthy of the Wrath Sinner Medal. That said, she does love her husband at least. Heck, even in prison, they're still dancing together and having a great time. And she did seem sincerely grateful when Bob gave her his miniature crown. Scarlet is just about pure evil, but we can't help but feel bad. Her head is clearly not in the right place, and hasn't been for years. It doesn't justify anything she does, but it's proof that she isn't outright soulless, at least. The gold medal of evil has to go to none other than the newest Despicable Me villain, Maxime Lamel. And this guy, Oh boy, this guy honestly surprised us. More so than any villain before him, Maxime absolutely hates Gru. This is not just due to Gru placing him under arrest with the AVL, but due to Gru stealing a song for the talent show in 9th grade. It's been literal decades, and Maxime still holds an intense grudge over this, to the point where he manages to break out of jail after threatening to kill Gru and his whole family. Gru is relocated as a result, leaving Maxime and Valentina to hunt him down to enact his evil plan, kidnapping Gru Jr. and taking him as his own son. Yes, really. Many of the villains in this section have involved kids in their schemes, but 1, none of them were as young as Gru Jr., and 2, none of them planned to do this from the beginning. Maxime's entire plan is to kidnap an infant child, and once he does, he hits him with the cockroachification ray, turning Gru Jr. into a mutant cockroach human hybrid to help kill his own father. That's some Joker-level pettiness and malice right there. But while that would at least make it reasonable to place him at the top of our list, we have one more scene that justifies his placement even more. In one scene, he has to stop by a gas station, and while there, growing frustrated by the card reader not working, he hits an innocent gas station attendant with the cockroach ray. Now you'd think, okay, he's just turning this dude into a cockroach hybrid to work as a servant. But you'd be wrong. He just shoots the guy, laughs about it, and then leaves. There was no benefit to his plan here at all. No pettiness or sabotage, no justification at all. Maxime just ruined a man's life and mutilated his body and mind for literally no reason. If you ask us, the trampling he got at the end of the movie was too light of a punishment. He has all of the worst characteristics of the villains before him and then some, making him an easy choice for the most evil character in the Despicable Me franchise.
With a name like Wicked Binge, it's no secret that we love ourselves some villains. So when a franchise like Despicable Me comes out with a ton of them, we're like kids in a candy store. Or in today's case, like kids in a courtroom. Because today we're going to be sentencing every Despicable Me villain for their crimes. We'll be going through these villains roughly in order of introduction. So kicking off our list is none other than the despicable he himself, Felonious Gru. Granted, he isn't so despicable anymore. He's not only a pretty great dad willing to dress as a fairy princess for his daughter's birthday party, but he even works to take down sinister villains with the Anti-Villain League. That kind of influence is enough for us to conclude that he's more than likely to be forgiven for his past crimes, which I'm totally not saying just because we sentenced him for those in an earlier video, but would you believe us if we said that even Gru's hero arc had a few questionable moments? Well, first and foremost, Gru is guilty of assault with a deadly weapon. Granted, none of us were booing him for freezing Margot's two-timing date Antonia with his iconic freeze ray, but that doesn't change the fact that Gru could have potentially killed the 12-year-old kid here, even if he was a rude one. In Despicable Me 3, he has another oddly satisfying crime, that being a hit-and-run collision with an absolute alpha male who wanted to show off his car's ability to extend and retract its wheels like a pair of stilts.
Come on, this is gonna be fun!
These are petty crimes, sure, but they're still done by a guy who's basically a government-employed superhero. Verdict. Look, Gru, you're a good guy, but you just can't go around using your superpowered weaponry on anyone who mildly irritates you. I'm not saying it isn't funny, it just isn't legal. Taking the state laws and possible damages into account, we sentence Gru to a mild sentence of $2,000 in fines and mandatory weapons safety classes. Next, we have Gru's partner in literal crime, Dr. Nefario. Now, he may be behind the scenes, but don't go thinking he's any less culpable as a result. He aids Gru and later El Macho with their villainous schemes.
What? So this is your new job opportunity?
Absolutely. You're gonna like this.
In both cases, he performs irresponsible scientific experiments on the minions, who he also kidnapped one time, by the way, creating weapons that help to cause potential havoc in the world. He doesn't even bother to make sure his lab is safe and secure, like closing the lab's window before he tests a chemical that makes it float.
I meant to close that. He'll be alright, I'm sure.
Whether it's out of true malice or just forgetfulness, it's still an issue. He also doesn't seem too remorseful about essentially dooming the world when he teams up with El Macho, only regretting it when he sees that it's putting Gru and his family in danger.
I mean, I'm happy to create an evil army to destroy the world, but nobody messes with my family.
But this does result in Nefario having a redemption arc of sorts, helping to stop El Macho and later using his scientific gifts to cure Gru's son, Gru Jr. at the end of Despicable Me 4, thus undoing his cockroachification. But there's one more thing we need to take into account here. In Minions Rise of Gru, Nefario adds a significant crime to his list, that being child endangerment. By helping to connect Gru to the Vicious Six, he effectively kickstarts Gru's path to becoming a major villain in his own right.
If you ever get famous, remember who gave you your first gadget.
Even though both of them eventually improve as people, we still can't help but feel that some action is in order. Verdict. Now, while Nefario's crimes are mostly in the distant past, we still have to take into consideration just how much destruction he caused, or at least contributed to. We don't really feel that prison would be the answer for him though, so we sentenced Dr. Nefario to a fine of $750,000. That should cover his damages, and it'll be enough of a hit to tell him that maybe he shouldn't be forcing little yellow dudes to help him test out his evil weapons. Now allow us to direct you with both direction and magnitude to our first true villain, Vector. Similar to Gru at the beginning of this movie, Vector is a bad guy who wants nothing more than to commit the most outrageous, attention-grabbing crimes he can get. From landmark theft to animal cruelty, Vector will sink to just about any low he can reach in order to grab the attention of those around him. Public endangerment for the fact that this dude has a security system that points explosive rockets and other weapons of mass destruction at anyone who approaches, even if it's just a few little girls trying to sell cookies. But his worst crime easily comes at the movie's climax, in which we see Vector kidnap Margot, Edith, and Agnes in the hopes of extorting their father, putting them in a ton of danger with his recklessness.
That's me, because I'm committing crimes with both direction and magnitude. Oh yeah!
He even purposely tries to trap Margot on his ship for the sake of pettiness, leading to her nearly falling to her death. That adds on a charge of child kidnapping, attempted murder, and child endangerment. Verdict. Look, I love Vector as a villain, but even with that being considered, I feel like this guy is just too dangerous to be kept around. Heck, he wouldn't even accept the Minions' help to get back to Earth in the Moon short, which resulted in him eventually getting stranded on Mars before finally making it back home, as he's seen in prison at the end of the 4th movie. With all of his crimes, plus his lack of remorse, we sentence Vector to 20 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15. Given how friendly he can be towards fellow villains, it's possible he could find some redemption eventually, but we're gonna need to give him a little bit of a trial period before we end up with another moon napper on our hands. But every cloud has a silver lining. For example, Vector might be in jail for a long time, but we're sure that'll make Mr. Perkins one proud papa. As the Bank of Evil's owner and proprietor, Mr. Perkins is mainly guilty of one major crime, aiding and abetting. That goes for both Gru and Vector, two criminals who have committed grand theft on a worldwide scale. Mind you, that's not to consider their other crimes, nor is it even to consider the other criminals Mr. Perkins has helped.
I love everything about your plan, except for one thing. You.
As if this weren't enough, when Gru tries to get money for his plan to steal the moon, Perkins makes a very thinly veiled threat to murder him if he fails.
Let's say this apple is you. If we don't start getting our money back.
Adding a count of extortion to his record. Verdict. It should hardly need to be said that the Bank of Evil needs to go, but that's nowhere near enough to make up for what its owner has already done. So we're gonna have to sentence to Mr. Perkins to immediate shutdown of the Bank of Evil and either 30 years in prison or a $20 million fine. Finishing up the first movie's villains, it's time to go over Miss Hattie's crimes. Although not a villain technically, it can't be denied that she is a terrible person. All her crimes relate back to the treatment of the orphan children she takes care of. From the outside, Miss Hattie's home for girls may look like an altruistic deed done by someone who genuinely cares for children. But from forcing them to sell cookies to shoving them into a cardboard box for hours at a time whenever they anger her to just straight up telling girls they'll never get adopted, emotional abuse is the least of this lady's legal concerns.
You're never gonna get adopted, Ada. You know that, don't you?
We're gonna tack on multiple charges of child labor and extortion, given our tendency to threaten time in those aforementioned cardboard box prisons if the girls don't reach their quotas.
Hi, Penny. Hi, guys.
Verdict. At the very least, Miss Hattie doesn't seem to cross any physical lines. The bar is in actual hell at this point, but at least she's clearing it to some extent. Still, she more than deserves to lose her orphanage, even if she still provided the bare minimum of care. In addition to closure, we're gonna come down as hard as the US child labor laws allow. We sentence Miss Hattie to $100,000 in fines and 18 months in prison. It may not be the worst fate out there, as again, she doesn't quite do enough to get any major amount of jail time, but it'll still give us the wicked stepmother wannabe her just desserts. Now let's move on to the sequel's villain. It's that masculine menace himself, El Macho. Ironically, El Macho is probably the least evil of the series' main antagonists in terms of intentions, but his list of crimes is one of the longest so far. Regarding his plan involving the Minions, this was of course an act of mass kidnapping and brainwashing, not to mention the aspect of possessing illegal weapons of mass destruction in regards to the PX-41 serum. We also have all the terrorism that he planned on committing with his rabid minions, the attempted world domination, and even framing an innocent man. Had Gru and Lucy not stopped El Macho, Floyd Eagleson's life could have been ruined, and so therefore could the lives of many bald people. Oh yeah, I almost forgot, with all those super extravagant crimes, there was still his attempted murder of Gru and Lucy. Verdict. Man, El Macho had zero chill. Given how he came back from a faked death just to try and take over the world again, it's safe to say that literally nothing is going to stop this guy from terrorizing the world however he can. As such, we're going to have to sentence him to the death penalty, and this time he'll be riding 2 sharks strapped with more dynamite into a bigger volcano that's also strapped with dynamite. We're not taking any risks this time, sorry to the sharks. Before we let the minions take over the spotlight, let's finish up the original trilogy starting with Gru's wannabe villain twin, Drew Gru. While he's a pretty fun character, Drew isn't really that effective as a villain. That's not to say he doesn't want to be, though. He's just, well, he just isn't. But thankfully, Drew's criminal ambitions aren't about world domination or terrorism or anything of the sort. Really, he just wants to steal stuff and flex about it. We see him steal 2 lollipops from an unguarded truck in one scene, so, petty theft, I guess. He also aided and abetted Gru's attempt to steal the diamond back from Balthazar Brott, but given what Brott planned to do with it, that's not even something we feel the need to punish. There's gotta be something more. Oh, right, during his candy theft, we see him do some reckless driving, as well as running from law enforcement. That's something. Verdict. Honestly, Drew doesn't seem capable of genuinely harming anyone, and what's more, he's utterly terrified of going to prison. But we don't want him to feel bad, so here's what we'll do. We'll sentence Drew to mandatory psychiatric help and $500 in fines. It should be enough of a slap on the wrist to get him on the straight and narrow without being too overwhelming for the guy, and I'm sure Drew will be more than willing to help him with that fine anyway. Now let's move from a wannabe bad boy to a really bad boy. Balthazar Brott. As another charismatic man with a unique fashion sense, it's no surprise that Brott has a similar list of crimes to Vector, in both direction and magnitude. In fact, Brott's is arguably even worse. He shares Vector's crimes of grand theft, of a highly coveted diamond, and even that classic third act child kidnapping and endangerment, using the girls as bait to lure Gru and Lucy to him, which tacks on a charge of extortion. Mind you, this is all before we've even mentioned his grand plan, to use a gigantic robot to terrorize Hollywood and an even more gigantic wad of bubblegum to float it into outer space.
Hey, Clive, I guess you could say our plan was out of this world.
There's just no way around those charges of domestic terrorism, mass destruction, and attempted mass murder. Verdict. Really, we have all the justification we need to give Brott the death sentence, and we would if it weren't for one attribute: insanity. After Hollywood abandoned him, Balthazar Brott genuinely came to believe he was the character he played on TV.
I've been a bad boy.
Which led him down a dark path. We can empathize with him for that much, but whether he's insane or not, he's just too dangerous to be allowed back into human society. So we're sentencing Balthazar Brott to life in prison without the possibility of parole. But who knows, maybe he'll meet some of the bad guys he inspired in there. See, you can be caring while upholding justice. This next entry might seem a little unfitting since they aren't really antagonists, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the minions. The minions are psychologically built to serve the most evil master they can find. It's hard to fault them for that, as even if they are guilty of historical levels of aiding and abetting numerous dangerous criminals from Gru to cavemen to Napoleon Bonaparte, no, we're not joking about that, it's just the way they're built. They're also incredibly devoted to their masters, no matter how dastardly they are. In Minions, for instance, they try to apologize to Scarlet even after being wrongfully locked up in her dungeon and almost tortured by Herb.
Wow, harder than I thought.
There's also the little factor of the vandalism and mass destruction they get up to on a daily basis. I mean, we've mentioned it before, but Mega Minion Mel's laser literally cut through the entire planet. You'd think this would mean life in prison without a doubt, but we all saw in Despicable Me 3 that prison will not do a thing against these guys. And if we executed them, well, that's just really cruel, honestly. Forgive me if that's too soft-hearted, but we've got to find a different solution, right? Verdict. Well, here's my idea. The minions are really stupid, right? They still serve Gru even when he stops being particularly evil, so what if we had decent people pretend to be evil, then keep them as pets? It's a simple, rather unorthodox way of pet whispering, but it might just work. We sentence the minions to behavioral therapy and domestication. Keep them full of bananas and apples, and the things will be probably just fine. From the minions themselves to the movie's main antagonist, now it's time for the legendary villainess Scarlet Overkill. Famous among villains for the criminal empire she's been running since childhood, Scarlet Overkill is an absolute menace, and she doesn't even try to hide it. On the contrary, she works to be the most evil villain in history to gain the respect, or more accurately fear, of everyone around her. She makes a celebrity out of herself and her evil deeds, appearing as a special speaker at VillainCon. Said evil deeds include grand theft of a royal artifact, as well as attempted usurping of royalty. I'm already not sure how to even sentence that, but it gets worse when you consider her treatment of the minions. First of all, she extorts them by threatening death if they disappoint her, and second of all, she's fully willing to send the minions to be tortured and killed by Herb for betraying her, by which she means them simply getting the crown and immediately giving it to her like she wanted.
I was going to be the picture of elegance and class, and you pinheads screwed it up!
Even being proven utterly wrong about their betrayal, she still attempts to kill her underlings for a misunderstanding on her end. Verdict. It's obvious that Scarlet is totally unstable, lacks any sense of a moral compass, and we haven't even mentioned her years of terror and mass destruction before meeting the minions. We also didn't mention the fact that while attempting to kill the minions for misguided revenge, she caused mass destruction across England and presumably killed many, many people. Really, there's no doubt about it. We've got to sentence her to life in prison without parole, but we'll let her keep the little crown that Bob gave her. You can't be the Queen of England, Scarlet, but you can be the queen of your prison cell. While he's not nearly as evil, we can't neglect to mention her spouse, Herb Overkill. He's an extremely loving and loyal husband who will do anything for his wife. Unfortunately, while this is in and of itself a good thing, it's brought down by the fact that said wife is Scarlet, a pure evil villain who's absolutely proud of that fact. Herb is responsible for making most of Scarlet's equipment, including but not limited to weapons and even outright torture devices, which calls for a charge of aiding and abetting an international terrorist.
This is gonna be so fun!
While Herb does seem to be quite pleasant outside of Scarlet's influence, he is willing to follow any order she gives him, even torturing and attempting to kill the minions, who he was actually quite friendly with beforehand. Verdict. Herb might be friendlier than Scarlet by a long shot, but that doesn't make him any less loyal to her, and while he's far more likely to be susceptible to rehabilitation than his beloved wife, his devotion to her would almost certainly result in him trying to break her out. Still, we'll let them have each other at least. Life without parole it is. And hey, they're dancing together in the finale of Despicable Me 4. Looks like we're right on the money. Okay guys, bear with us. We're almost to the newest movie, but let's take a quick detour to the rise of Gru to talk about Wild Knuckles. He was the leader of the Vicious Six before he was callously betrayed by them due to his old age. We definitely feel for him there. We don't, however, sympathize with his years of committing notorious thefts, attempted murders, and the notoriously his kidnapping of Gru, who he holds hostage and tortures in an attempt to extort his former colleagues into giving him the medallion in exchange for his safe return. When it turns out that they don't actually care about Gru's safety though, Wild Knuckles starts to actually sympathize, taking Gru under his wing and teaching him how to commit crimes.
Wait till you see what I'm gonna teach you next.
He even saves Gru's life and nearly sacrifices his own, defeating his treacherous former crew. Verdict. It's rather unlikely that Wild Knuckles would get charged since, most of the world believes he's dead, but if the cops were to somehow get their hands on him, we have a feeling they'd feel indebted to him for saving the city and possibly the world, not to mention the life of a kid who would go on to stop even bigger threats in the future. Still, Wild Knuckles gets 1 year in jail and a $1,000 fine for his past threats. This way, we can't say he got off scot-free, but we also can't say it's anything he can't handle. Heck, who's to say we won't accidentally leave his cell door unlocked? But while Wild Knuckles got off with a little bit of leeway, his former allies, the Vicious Five, formerly Six, aren't gonna get such an easy punishment. As members of Wild's crew, they share basically all the crimes he committed: theft, attempted murder, kidnapping, and torture. During the climactic battle, they earned that torture charge by essentially crucifying Gru on a clock tower, which would have had this literal child brutally murdered on full display as they destroyed the city.
Did you forget what time it is?
That surely has to count as both regular terrorism and psychological terrorism, right? Verdict. Look, we won't waste any time here. Attempting to kill an innocent child with no remorse while committing a major act of terrorism when you already have more than a few warrants out for your arrest? These five just earned themselves a quintuple death penalty! But without further ado, it's time to move on to the newest movie in the saga, starting with its secondary villain, Principal Übelschlecht. It's no surprise that the lady whose name literally translates to Principal Evil Bad has a pretty rough criminal record. For starters, well, she's the principal of Lycée Balsbon, meaning she's trained numerous villains in her lifetime, and her favorite student happens to be one of the most notorious criminals out there. There's no way that doesn't count as aiding and abetting criminals on a massive scale. How she's even able to run this school is anyone's guess, but I guess it's another Bank of Evil situation where the less we question it, the better. If running this school doesn't count enough, she also exposes the location of Gru's relocated family to Maxime Le Mal, placing their lives in danger. Whether knowingly or not, this leads to the endangerment of civilians. Later on, she forces herself into Gru's home to await his return, which definitely counts as trespassing. And the fact that Gru's children are present at the time makes this even worse. Verdict. With how should we say this, experienced Übelschlecht is in the age category? Yeah, that's right. You might be deceived into thinking she's harmless, but that only makes her all the more dangerous, especially given how she managed to chase down Gru and go toe-to-toe with Lucy, all with the help of her high-tech wheelchair. What's more, as long as she's allowed to run that school, there's gonna be some serious trouble. We're gonna have to punish Übelschlecht by shutting down Lycée Balsbon and enforcing life in prison. Oh, and we're replacing that wheelchair with a normal one. Sorry, girl, you just can't be trusted with it. From, presumably, the oldest villain to the youngest, up next we have Poppy Prescott. Poppy is a ruthless teenage villain in training who wants to make an intimidating name for herself. That'll be a challenge with the name Poppy, but she gets a good start by blackmailing Gru into helping her with a heist under the threat of having his former supervillain status exposed. With Gru's help, she ends up breaking and entering into Lycée Balsbon, which is honestly kind of a gray area, morally speaking. I mean, she's literally trying to further her education. We can't fault her too much, right?
Oh no! I ruined our heist!
We can fault her a little bit for the stealing of their school mascot, Lenny the Honey Badger, earning her a mild charge of petnapping. While realistically none of these would lead to charges since both Laissez Pasban and Gru have their own stuff to hide, Poppy could definitely get herself into trouble from an objective standpoint. That said, at the end of the day, she does end up proving herself to be a decent person. She helps Gru rescue Gru Jr. after he's kidnapped by Maxine, offering him a ride to catch up to him. Verdict. Poppy's villainous aspirations are definitely concerning, but on top of her good qualities, we have to remember that, despite anything else, she is still just a child. Given how quickly she shifts from a snooty blackmailer to a decent, altruistic anti-hero, it's safe to say she has the potential to avoid the path of villainy. As such, we sentence her to mandatory counseling and a $300 fine. It's not enough to mess up her life or anything, but it's plenty enough for a teenager to realize they might want to start changing their ways. Our second to last villain is Valentina, and she has but one crime under her individual belt: aiding and abetting. Valentina doesn't really do much of her own volition, she really just acts as support for her boyfriend. Verdict. But you probably know where this is going. For the fact that her boyfriend is a certain cockroach-themed bad guy, we have to sentence her to life imprisonment, especially given just how nonchalant she is about going along with his evil deeds. But now, without further ado, it's time to get to the newest and most evil villain in the franchise, Maxime Le Mal. Let's see, for one thing, Maxime is guilty of unethical experimentation and mutilation. We can't really fault him too much for turning himself into a freaky part cockroach dude, but forcing that onto an innocent gas station worker is a step too far. Then, as if that's not bad enough, there's the final battle in which he transforms Gru Jr., a literal infant. This guy mutilated a baby, and to make matters worse, he planned this out. His main goal was kidnapping Gru Jr. as revenge on Gru for stealing his talent show idea in the 9th grade. This leads to him engaging in psychological terrorism and crimes against humanity during his pursuit of Gru, culminating in attempted murder during the climactic battle. Verdict. If it weren't for his and Gru's duet, I would say there's no silver lining in Maxime surviving. This guy committed some of the most depraved acts of any character in this franchise, and it doesn't even have the insanity plea that characters like Scarlet or Brat do. This guy's just petty, arrogant, and cruel. To make matters worse, he involved an infant child in his crimes, which no court's gonna go easy on. So our sentence for him is 3 simple words: finish the job. Yeah, you know how the Mega Minions rode in on a stampede of bulls to trample him? Let's just do that again, but more intentionally. We saw from his first arrest that being put in jail only agitates this guy even further, so let's put that giant earth-shattering laser beam to good use. That ought to show you how unsquishable cockroaches really are, Le Mal. The Despicable Me franchise has been absolutely dominating pop culture over the past decade, and for better or for worse, that's about 95% thanks to the Minions. When these mutant Twinkies aren't taking over your aunt's Facebook feed, they're responsible for some of the most delightfully despicable parodies out there, and with how prominent they are, you can bet they get weird.
They only have 3 fingers.
So today we're going over some of the best, or at least some of the best in terms of entertainment value. We'll start with the times these little yellow creatures have made it into surprisingly high-quality parodies and even some other series. These are the high-quality spoofs. Hashtag justice for Brian the Minion. Let's start with the Minions in their natural habitat, the theater. This Movie Clips miniseries features Brian the Minion, a guy who just wants to enjoy a movie, which is an unforgivable crime in the eyes of the Minions. Gotta love how him shushing the others is enough to get him kicked out, but them deliberately splashing his face with a drink is okay. It's like the worst kind of SpongeBob episode. You know, the ones where they just make you feel sorry for poor Squidward. We can't blame Family Guy for poking fun at Harvey Weinstein, but I wish they left that poor minion out of it.
Now you touch it. You know what to touch.
Banana!
It had to happen sometime. This one is thankfully more lighthearted. With Steve Carell playing both Michael Scott and Gru, it was only a matter of time before one parodied the other. And the prophecy was fulfilled in this parody of The Office's opening credits, complete with Gru and his crew. Extra points for the obvious yet profound play on words that is Dunder Minion. Smart advertising. With how popular the Minions have become, it's not surprising that some of the official parodies double as advertising for merchandise. For instance, what better way to capitalize on the potential of Minions Lego sets than to make an official animation with them? They definitely captured the spirit here. It's just a shame they didn't use actual Legos instead of regular animation. Rise of Gru, SparkNotes edition. In a very Cass Vandepol-esque summary video, Cantoons managed to summarize Minions The Rise of Gru in only 60 seconds. Honestly, it's a pretty good summary, but I can't help but notice that Wild Knuckles never appears after he steals the medallion, meaning we can only assume that he's dead in this parody. Wait, what do you mean? His voice actor's actually dead? You had to be there. Did you guys know that Vector was in Avengers Infinity War? Yeah, he was totally there. You just don't remember. It's said that subsequent showings of the film removed his presence though, and it's hard not to see why. As you can see from his sheer presence, they likely wanted to keep out any characters who could instantly defeat Thanos in one strike, so it makes sense. The yellow Tic Tac embarks on its final journey. In what is shockingly one of Meat Canyon's least terrifying parodies, we see one interpretation of the life cycle of a minion, namely its final moments past its prime and the creation of new life via its teeth gaining sentience. Dude, I promise you, these videos are usually way more disturbing. Of course, no disrespect to Meat Canyon, but he clearly needs to brush up on his minion lore. Doesn't he know that minions are immortal? I mean, immortal or not, apparently even parodies can't resist showing minion nudity. It gets grosser. Brandon Rogers' take on a minion past his prime is one of the most absolutely unhinged minion parodies out there, and we love it for that.
Hey, you wanna say that to my face?
First of all, props to whatever Target was cool with letting an almost naked man covered in yellow body paint film in their store. Second of all, there's not even a single beautiful line of dialogue from this video I want to spoil for any of you, but just know there is nothing kid-friendly about this video, save for the fact that the therapist lady really does look like she could be a character in the movies. It's me, a minion! For our final high-quality spoof, we have one of the greatest animated film duologies to ever hit the small screen, Rigmarole's Minions Vacation series. Here, Gru sends the minions on a much-needed vacation where they manage to kill several people, be mistaken for radical terrorists, get crucified by the Pope, and travel through time to overthrow several ancient civilizations. Not only are these really funny videos, but they show just how much potential a more unhinged Minions series would be. Like, if they're gonna be insane and impulsive creatures, go all the way with it, right? Someone needs to get an Adult Swim Minions series up and running. These next few parodies have lower production costs, but the amount of time put into them more than makes up for it. We'll call these the low-budget passion projects. You were expecting minions, but it was me, Gru! Okay, not only is the editing and timing of this parody really good, as someone who's actually watched JoJo before, I can confirm they actually timed some of the music and animation pretty spot on. This genuinely had me hyped to watch the Gru anime. You know, the one that isn't real. Maybe one day. Redeemable me. No offense, Mr. Gru, but what's the point of having the whole moon when your heart is still empty? In this play put on by the Door Christian Fellowship Church, we see Gru discover the love of Jesus, adding a much-needed religious aspect to the classic kids movie. But look, I'm all for teaching the kids and Gru that Jesus loves them, and with all the laughter in the audience, it's nice to know this church is really trying. It's just weird to practically plagiarize a whole movie, only to add a few words about Jesus here and there. That said, Gru is killing it. The costume, the voice, if we ever have a live-action reboot, I give this guy a callback. Method acting. If there's ever a live-action Minions movie, though, you'll want a professional, like Brohacker, who took it upon himself to replace the role of several hostile minions in different shorts. Honestly, the editing here is pretty good. It's just very confusing whether he likes the minions or absolutely detests them. The world may never know. Dedication for all the wrong reasons. The only complaint I have about this video is that it isn't longer. I want to know more. Like, who are these people? Why does he want to sabotage his brother's date so bad? Where did he find all these minions? Did anyone get arrested? And most importantly, is it just me, or would Drew absolutely do something like this to Gru? The fans reign supreme. Remember how earlier we lamented the fact that the Lego Minions animation was CGI instead of stop motion? On that note, you gotta admire the sheer amount of effort that went into this one. The smoothness of that stop motion is just way too good for a YouTube Minions parody. And I say that as a compliment of the highest degree. Definitely weird to see Gru without his snow miser nose though. So many ways to die. This one, like the Lego animation earlier, is really smooth, high effort, and well animated. Just a bit more gruesome, seeing these weird Play-Doh minions murdered in various ways. Gotta love the duality of some of these deaths too. One second they're having a detailed horror movie death sequence, and the next they're just getting rubbed on a cheese grater. When the literal first second of your video is a minion blowing his brains out with a shotgun, you know you're looking at absolute peak YouTube. This is that kind of video we all saw at least once when we were like 11 years old. The Minions are my favorite K-pop group. You know what the weirdest thing about Blackpink covering a Minions performance is? It's the fact that this isn't even the last K-pop reference we're going to be making today. With that, it's time to take a moment to reflect on some of the weird merchandise and commercials the Minions have seen over the years. Yellow guys can't jump, but they can tell you who the greatest basketball player of all time is, the GOAT, if you will.
La facilidad, Michael Jordan et la GOAT. Blah!
Honestly, it's a crime that none of them mentioned Gru, especially since everyone knows GOAT stands for Gru of all time. The most easiest decision you ever make. That decision, of course, being to go to JT's Chrysler Jeep Dodge in Lexington, where Gru and the Monions, no relation, are here to give you a whole moon's worth of great deals. If that's not a sweet enough deal for you, you'll also get to witness Stuart's brilliant dance moves. Why'd you have to stop him, Gru? He was just getting to the best part. Matching the energy. If there's one mascot who can at least somewhat match the chaos of the Minions, it's gotta be the Happy Meal boxes. Yeah, remember when they randomly decided to make this thing sentient? No? Oh, well, sorry for reminding you then. In any case, they're still always down to have a good time with the Minions. That sounded wrong. And since McDonald's is always down to get some cash from those toy collaborations, the relationship seems to be beneficial. Never realized how close the Minions' thank you sounds to f you, though.
Thank you.
The most inevitable Minions food collab. Honestly, if anything, we're shocked that it took them 3 movies to put the Minions and Tic Tacs in a blender and, of course, make them banana flavored. IHOB. You know, I can't disagree with Otto here. That banana pancake actually does look pretty good. I think we might have different intentions with it, though. Wait, Minions have phones? They have enough knowledge of them to make an advertisement for Vivo smartphones, at least. Gotta love how they just turn Bob tripping into an impromptu part of the dance so he won't feel bad. Girl, you need a shot of M7. Finally, here's a more recent example of weird Minions merch. The Minions X BTS Funko Pop Collection. This high-quality collector's item can be yours for only $99.99. And ignoring quite literally everything else about this, the Minions are among the few characters whose designs translate well to Funko Pops. Can't say the same for Lego. Actually, the Minions look okay-ish, at least. Gru, on the other hand, man, what did they do to you? Look how they massacred my boy! But now it's time to get back to the fan-made stuff. These are some of the most truly bizarre parodies we could find. F***ing Minions tampons? Before you ask why this isn't in the last category, worry not, this is thankfully not an actual product. Apparently, it was a joke post made by Kotex to promote the Minions spin-off movie. At least that's what they'd have you think. No, we have an alternate theory. They were gauging interest in the market for Minions tampons. Thankfully, the world still has some lines it just won't cross, one of which is shoving Minions into the delicate areas of people. Low effort, high fun. Going down the YouTube rabbit hole of Minions parodies really helps to showcase just how many people love these little dudes. Even adult partygoers aren't too cool to cosplay as these little corn pops and dance, nor is the staff of this school who had the brilliant idea to dress up in pillowcases with Minions on them. Look, we could knock it all day, without effort, but you gotta respect that much effort to hype your students up, right? Lil Bob. This man dared to doubt the Minions' secret rap talents. He dared to doubt and therefore dared to be proven wrong when Minion number 2 said, "Shawty want my banana." I felt that. No, I didn't. Breaking Bob. Have you ever wondered what a movie about the Minions becoming criminal investigators would be like? Probably not, but Joey Casasanto has answered it anyway with True Minion. In this movie that might or might not actually exist, seriously, I have no idea, Gru is dead and it's time for Stuart to work through his grief and find his missing daughters. That's the face of a Minion who has truly lost everything, but gained the most important thing of all, a Giga Chad jawline. Oh, are you starting to find things weird? Well, get used to it because now we've reached the most confusing yet inevitable section of the video. These are the downright inexplicable animations and parodies the Minions have inspired, which we'll dub the Banana Brain Rot section. Pixar is so back. This is one of those spoofs that's pretty innocent, but also sort of unsettling. This masterpiece by Crea TVs on YouTube features a still image of a gangster Minion shooting some bananas before crushing the eye in Pixar. What's more bizarre than the video itself is the community that watched it. This video has been up for 7 years with nearly 3 million views and has only 14 comments and, like, can we please talk about this interaction? Like, what do you mean Merry Christmas? This video was uploaded in August. What? It's only going to get more confusing from here, but I just wanted to highlight the absolute absurdity we're dealing with here. Crea TVs 2, Electric Boogaloo. Honestly, if the Minions were to have their take on the Pixar logo, they'd definitely be the type to just crush all of the letters. So this spoof is both oddly satisfying and true to the characters. I don't even know what to title this series. Now, this series of Minions animations by Sparky and Kay on YouTube is interesting in that it actually has some effort put into it. The animation and voice acting, surprisingly, they're decent, and it even tries to tie multiple parodies into an overarching story, which is really confusing, actually. Okay, so this one Minion gets a bunch of ads to take off his glasses for some reason, and on an unrelated note, the gang accidentally sends Gru into space. They then go to work at McDonald's to buy a rocket, which they use to fly to Mars. But they end up in the land of Ooh from Adventure Time, where Jake the dog sends them through a portal into Minecraft, and after being blown up by a creeper, they're inexplicably sent to Springfield, where they meet the Simpsons, where Professor Frink sends them into space, and they, like Poochie, die on the way back to their home planet. I can't tell if they just ran out of ideas for how to save Gru, or if this is actually a subversive art piece that shows how even the most lighthearted of stories can have tragic endings, but what I do know is... No, I got nothing. Points for creativity, though. The Minions Coffin Dance. I mean, if nothing else, I can say that if there is any fictional character who would dance at a funeral, it would be the Minions. That said, what am I looking at? Oh, silly question. It's all your favorite Minions from Despicable Me. There's Zombie Minion, Hunchback Minion, and my personal favorite, Secret Love Child of Minion and Mr. Waternoose from Monsters Inc. Minion. What a great character arc he had. Old McMinion had a content farm. Oh no. Look, we all knew this type of video was coming. Those poorly animated spoofs that take beloved IPs and throw them into bizarre or shocking situations with only the lowest effort of animation. Dex Studios is one of these channels, with all the coherent plot of a Cocomelon song. A lot of the channel's videos feature Minions getting into their usual shenanigans, from having a weirdly consistent beef with SpongeBob for some reason to being hunted down by pirates and bounty hunters on a regular basis. With all that being considered, would you believe me if I said the most unsettling part of this channel was hearing the Minions speak regular English?
Buff, look at that footprint.
You know, I'm really not looking forward to how this will affect my YouTube recommendations going forward. Oh god, it's starting. Here we have a step below, or above, normal brain rot content. This is live action brain rot content, which seems to be a low budget rendition of some scenes from the Minions movie. Thank goodness that guy shouted, "Bear!" after hitting that bear several times. I was worried he'd be in trouble for a second there. Keep the brain rot coming. Yeah, you know the drill. Poor quality animation on a channel with over 500,000 subscribers, but you gotta love just how nice the creator is with those comments. Dudes replying to insults, asking for suggestions to improve. Personally, I think Giant Skeleton vs. King vs. Minion is a masterpiece of cinematic beauty, but it could totally use a live action reboot. Despicable YTP. Who needs all those silly content farms and whatnot when we have good old-fashioned YouTube poop videos? Now, before you judge us, it's not what it sounds like. The YTP genre was prolific in the 2010s and essentially consisted of taking cartoons or movies and editing them to hell and back to create the most cursed, confusing, inappropriate plot lines imaginable. If you want to scratch that part of your brain that still has a middle schooler sense of humor, these are for you. And there are no shortage of Despicable Me ones, from the Kickable Me film saga by XB at the movies to one ominously titled Gru Likes Garls, which, despite its unsettling title, has my favorite joke in any of these. Gen Z, this one's for us. This one's from just about the same era. Come on, remember all those super overstimulating MLG parody videos? They'd always have that same Illuminati confirmed song and a crap ton of meme references. Of course, one brain-smoothing viral sensation had to meet up with another, right? You know, it's gotta be a good video when it has Minions and Dank in the title. Or at the very least, it'll be an interesting one. Woody's got a friend in Dave. What's a more iconic duo than Woody and Buzz? Woody and Dave! Yeah, the Minion. Don't remember him? Well, in this series of videos, we see Woody Wonder and his Minion pal Dave go on a mix of criminal adventures and straight-up domestic assaults, all of which involve bananas. What's more, Dave might be the most complex character in all of Despicable Me lore. Take this video, for example. We see here that Dave worked alongside Adolf Hitler. Honestly, it makes sense. But later on, he also worked alongside Martin Luther King Jr.? Where this guy's moral alignments are is beyond any of us, but what we do know is that it wasn't enough to fulfill him, so he sold himself on eBay to a thankfully friendly buyer. It's like a dating app, but more dangerous. The only thing funnier than a Deal-tastic Me-esque commercial is a Deal-tastic Me commercial that's trying to be a full-on parody. Points for effort and passion. But seriously, are we just gonna ignore that whole Hitler thing?
Here we go! 1, 2.
For years now, the lovable Minions have been all over the place, for better or for worse. And as cringy as they can be, you have to admit, they can be charming at times. But have you ever stopped to wonder about the origins of these yellow creatures? Or the deeper meaning behind their behavior and motivations? I mean, probably not, but we're still gonna make this video. We'll be diving headfirst into the world of Illumination's Minions, exploring the most fascinating and mind-bending theories that surround these beloved/hated characters. So sit back, grab some bananas, and join us as we separate these theories from BS to truth bombs. Let's start with our first category. These theories have so many holes that they can't possibly be true, they lack evidence, or they've been confirmed false by the creators. These theories are BS. Let's start with the true origins of the Minions. There's a fascinating theory out there about the origins of these beloved yellow creatures. According to this theory by Reddit user GingerSnap1138, the Minions were not just a creation of the brilliant supervillain Gru, but instead had a much darker origin story. The theory suggests that Gru was a simple scientist, a kind, single father who adored his 3 daughters more than anything else in the world. Tragically, his daughters were killed in a senseless act of violence, and Gru's mind snapped. He threw himself into his work, determined to bring his daughters back to life. Using his scientific knowledge, Gru managed to unlock the secrets of human cloning and successfully cloned his beloved daughters. However, the clones began to degrade and transform into hideous yellow creatures with bulging eyes and tight yellow skin. Unable to accept that these monstrous creatures were his daughters, Gru convinced himself that they were his loyal evil minions created to serve him in his quest for world domination. In his delusions, Gru saw himself as the greatest supervillain of all time and reveled in the control he had over these strange, obedient creatures.
Big Boss!
As the theory goes, this is why Gru's world is so exaggerated and cartoonish. It's also why the minions never seem to age, and why they share similar height ratios to Gru's 3 daughters. And perhaps more disturbingly, it's why the Despicable Me franchise has such a heavy, unsettling feeling of dread and sorrow. While this theory may seem like a dark and twisted take on the beloved franchise, it's hard to deny that it's more than a bit far-fetched. So we have to mark this theory as BS. And don't the Minions movies completely debunk this theory? Moving on from the BS, these theories still have a lot of problems. Not enough to say that they're completely debunked, but still, these theories are full of holes. Is Gru the most evil guy ever? Well, let's talk about a theory that's been going around about the villainous character Gru from the Despicable Me franchise. According to this theory, Gru joins forces with the cute little yellow creatures who we know always follow the evilest villains around. So, this would mean that Gru is even eviler than some pretty notorious figures like Pol Pot and Saddam Hussein. This theory, presented by Reddit user Ashy Knees, is based on the idea that the Minions movie is set in 1968, during the height of the Cold War. At that time, the USSR was a pretty big threat to the world, but apparently Gru was even more villainous than them. And since Gru had control of the Minions during the time of Pol Pot's genocide in the mid-70s, it's safe to say that he's even eviler than that guy too.
You do not belong here! You're fired!
Of course, we can't definitively say if Gru is more vile than some of history's most infamous dictators like Hitler, Stalin, or Mao Zedong, but since he keeps the Minions under his control for the next 38 years, it's probably safe to say that he's done some pretty bad stuff. In fact, this theory suggests that Gru's kill count might be higher than 4 million. So is Gru really that naughty, to put it lightly? Well, it's just a theory, but an interesting one at that. It definitely adds a new layer of complexity to the character and makes you wonder what he's been up to all these years. However, the fact of the matter is that it's hard to imagine the creators thinking that Gru is more despicable, pun intended, than the evilest men in the history of the world. The fact of the matter is that this theory is far more fun, in a way, than it is fact, and we have to mark it as full of holes. Are the Minions mutants? Have you ever watched the movie Minions and wondered if these little yellow creatures are mutants? Me neither, but a theory's been circulating that suggests just that. The idea, given by Reddit user Carvel Tabernula, proposes that the Minions possess unusual traits and abilities that set them apart from typical living beings. Firstly, let's talk about their vulnerability and strength. In one scene, the Minions are subjected to various forms of torture, including a chair of spikes and a wheel of torture, yet they remain unscathed. Even more impressively, Kevin, one of the Minions, becomes gigantic and swallows a large rocket without any harm befalling him. Could this indicate superhuman strength and resilience? Another clue lies in their appearance. The Minions' yellow skin is certainly unusual and raises questions about their origin. Could they be aliens, or perhaps even mutants? It's worth noting that in X-Men, some mutants have distinctive physical features that differentiate them from others. Could this be the case for the Minions as well? Finally, the fact that the Minions have served many bad guys throughout history and seemingly never die suggests that they are a long-lived species. It's unclear if they are truly immortal, but the theory proposes that they're over 1 million years old. All of these observations suggest that the Minions may indeed be mutants. Of course, this theory is purely speculative, but it's certainly an interesting one to ponder. However, there is nowhere near enough evidence to back it up, so it's thusly full of holes. With that said, we're now into the middle category, where we may stumble onto some truth. Maybe. These theories are possible. Did the Minions serve Tutor? Let's talk about a theory given by Reddit user Lapis Lazuli is the best that suggests that the Minions may have served the Tutor monarchy before joining Blackbeard's crew. There are some interesting connections between the Minions and Tutor's history. For one thing, Minion was a type of small cannon used during the Tudor era, from 1485 to the late 17th century. The very last time these cannons were used was in 1716, the same year the Minions are believed to have joined Blackbeard's crew. Additionally, the golden age of piracy began in the late 17th century, when the use of Minion cannons were starting to decline. This could suggest that the Minions were seeking out a new line of work after their cannon expertise became less relevant. Furthermore, the Minions' main goal is to serve the most despicable master, and there were certainly some Tudor monarchs who would fit that bill. Henry VIII and Mary I, aka Bloody Mary, were not exactly known for their kindness and compassion. Finally, there are hints in the movies that the Minions have some sort of connection to the British monarchy. For example, Bob was able to pull Excalibur from the stone, and Kevin accepted a knighthood from the Queen.
Well done.
All of this evidence leads to an intriguing theory that the Minions may have served the Tudor monarchy before embarking on their adventures with Blackbeard. While we may never know for sure, it's certainly a possibility that adds an extra layer of depth to the Minions' backstory, and so there's enough evidence to say that it's possible. How do you kill a Minion? Minions have captured the hearts of audiences worldwide with their lovable antics and adorable language. However, some fans have been left wondering, how do you kill a Minion? I know I have. Is there a secret to defeating these little creatures, or are they invincible? One popular theory comes from the YouTube channel Film Theory, which suggests that the Minions are single-celled organisms that reproduce asexually. According to this theory, the Minions' nucleus, located in their distinctive eye, is the key to their existence. If the nucleus is destroyed, the rest of the Minion's body will disintegrate, as the nucleus is responsible for controlling all of the creature's bodily functions. The theory also proposes that the Minions' yellow color is a result of their cellular makeup, which includes carotenoids that give them their bright hue. While this idea is certainly imaginative, it's important to remember that it is purely fictional. There's no evidence from the films to support the notion that the Minions are single-celled organisms, and this theory is based entirely on fictional characters and their fictional anatomy. Nonetheless, the theory is a testament to the creativity and imagination of its creators, and it provides a fun and engaging discussion topic for fans of the franchise. The popularity of the Minions has inspired a wide range of fan theories, artwork, and merchandise, and their quirky language and sometimes lovable personalities continue to delight audiences of all ages. In conclusion, while the theory that Minions are single-celled organisms may not be supported by scientific evidence, it is certainly a creative and entertaining idea that demonstrates the enduring appeal of these beloved characters. And the theory isn't a bad one either, so we mark it as possible. These next conspiracies make a lot of sense. In fact, we think they're more likely to be true than not. These theories are probable. Are the Minions immortal? The theory that the Minions are immortal beings is based on various pieces of evidence from the Despicable Me franchise. The Minions have been depicted as surviving extreme situations without suffering any harm, and they seem to have an endless supply of energy and resilience. One piece of evidence that supports this theory is that the Minions have been around for centuries. They first appeared in the movie Despicable Me, set in the 1960s, but they're also shown in the prequel Minions, which, for a bit, takes place in the prehistoric era, and in Despicable Me 3, set in present day. This level of longevity suggests that the Minions are not subject to the normal aging process and can potentially survive indefinitely. Moreover, the Minions have demonstrated a remarkable ability to survive dangerous situations. They've been shown to survive explosions, falls from great heights, and other mishaps that would kill any human being. They seem to have an innate sense of self-preservation, and they always manage to come out unscathed. Another supporting factor is the fact that the Minions reproduce asexually, which means they don't have to rely on mating to continue their population. In the movie Minions: Rise of Gru, it's shown that the Minions are created in a laboratory, which further suggests their immortality. It's also worth noting that the Minions are depicted as being somewhat simplistic and childlike, with a limited understanding of the world around them. This may be a deliberate choice on the part of the creators to emphasize their immortality, as they seem to exist outside of the normal human experience of growth and development. Overall, while the theory that the Minions are immortal beings is not confirmed nor explicitly stated within the Despicable Me franchise, there is enough evidence to suggest that they do possess qualities that make them effectively immortal, so this theory is probable. Finally, we've reached the truth, confirmed truth. People have blown the whistle on these theories with such compelling evidence that they must be true. These theories are the truth bombs. Why are there no female Minions? There's been a long-standing debate about the gender of the adorable little Minions from the Despicable Me franchise. Some people thought they were gender neutral because they wore both male and female clothes, while others believed they were male since they all had male names. The theory is that all Minions are male and that there are no female Minions.
Yeah! Go, Bob!
Well, it turns out that the creator of Minions, Pierre Coffin, has officially confirmed that they are all male. When asked why he made that decision, Coffin explained that he just couldn't imagine them as anything else. Fair enough, I guess. However, some people are unhappy about this revelation, arguing that it perpetuates gender inequality and sends a negative message to children. One concerned parent wrote on their blog that movies like Minions are teaching a new generation to accept a world where girls are excluded. Okay, well, one burning question remains. If all Minions are male, how do they reproduce? A few fan theories are floating around about this, such as the idea that they are turned into Minions by a machine cloned from mutated DNA. It's unclear exactly how they came to be, but we may find out more in future movies. Regardless of their gender or reproductive capabilities, one thing is certain: the Minions are here to stay. Whether you love them or find them really annoying, they've become an integral part of popular culture, and we can expect to see a lot more of them in the future. This theory is undoubtedly a truth bomb.